Hello, we are here today with Paul Brody, who is the lead of the EY blockchain project at EY, Ernst& Young. Paul, give an intro to yourself. I know I butchered your title because it's like global blockchain lead, I think is what it was,
That is
right?
it. That's actually it's global blockchain leader. And by the way, Hudson, delightful to see you. Always, actually, a delight to see you. I very much enjoyed the last time we caught up in San Francisco. We talked about coffee and other choices, and we settled on ice cream, which I think was an excellent choice.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So it's nice to see you. I'm Paul Brody. I'm the global blockchain leader for the people who are watching at EY, and we are one of what some people sometimes call the Big Four, which is a group of professional services companies, and with a particular focus on accounting and audit.
Gotcha. Thank you so much for that explanation. So I guess I'm going to go through some questions here to kind of make sure that people who are working in blockchain today understand where EY is at, some of your thoughts on blockchain, and where things are at with privacy and other things that your group dives into. So the first one is kind of related to just EY in general, or EY blockchain. You have a blockchain SaaS solution, so software as a service. And most of the people I talk to kind of roll their eyes when I'm like, hey, this big business has done a blockchain thing. So a lot of previous companies haven't done as well in trying to deploy these kind of things or giving, promises they can't keep. So how is this whole space for enterprise blockchain and related different now, and what is EY doing?
So great questions. I The best way to kind of summarize what's unique and special about what we're doing at EY is to really talk about how we've taken a really different approach to the marketplace than just about anybody else. And it's underpinned by kind of a couple of really important things that we believe that, to be honest, it's frustrating that many people who, like you, like when you and I talk, like we're in full agreement. What's always disappointing is how many other enterprise users don't kind of see the same path that we do, although I think they're coming around. Number one, first and foremost, EY is a public blockchain focused company. We are not here in the business of building private blockchains or permission blockchains. Fundamentally, this idea to me of a centralized, decentralized system doesn't make sense. Like the hint is in the title. If you have a permission system, you don't actually need a blockchain. If you can agree upon a third party to run your network, you could just have them run a server for you. It doesn't do anything special. So first and foremost, we are a public blockchain company, and specifically, we are focused on Ethereum. Now, I often get sucked into like, hey, Paul, you're an ETH maxi. I'm not an ETH maxi. I'm an ETH pragmatist. And it comes down to this, which is enterprises want to just like us, they want to transact with each other. We want to solve a business transaction trust issue between large firms, and we want to be able to do so in the most widely adopted network. I'm not going to get sucked into this question of which one is better. To me, that's kind of irrelevant. Ethereum works, it's widely used, therefore that's what we're going to focus on. And by the way, from my standpoint, strategically, it's much better to be really, really good at one thing, which is Ethereum, than so at many things. And then lastly, we're different from our peers in the sense that we don't just want to do consulting or financial statement audits, but we do want to solve really, really important problems. And in particular, there's one that we believe we've sort of focused on that others have not, which is around privacy. And the reason for this is relatively simple. A lot of consumers don't worry so much about their privacy online. I wish they worried more, by the way. I worry about privacy, and I wish more people worried about it. But the reality is that blockchains in general have no privacy by default. That seems fine for most consumers. I can tell you, as somebody who's been in the enterprise software business for 25 years, that's a non-starter. Companies would love to use smart contracts for business agreements, supply chain management, business operations, but they don't want to let their competition know who they are, what they're buying, how much they're paying, where it's going. And so our big priority over the last few years has been to try to solve the privacy problem for users, especially enterprise users, and to do so without losing sight of the fundamental principle that the value proposition of blockchains is that they are decentralized, and that they are and that they enable interaction without having to trust a single centralized third party.
Gotcha. No, that's a really, really good way to do it, I think. And yeah, people will come around. I also think that there's been a trend over the years for use cases that everyone's like super excited about, whether it be, like with at least with an enterprise, there's like supply chain things, and all these people are doing supply chain, and then on like the non-enterprise side, it's like, oh, token curated registries, TCRs, and so things kind of come and go. What are like the most unique use cases you're seeing right now, especially in the blockchain privacy area, and is opt-in privacy that we've been hearing about recently something that plays into that?
So for enterprise users, the big driver of privacy, there's two big drivers of privacy, and it really comes down to this. Every business agreement, and this is one of my favorite things, so please forgive me for doing this because you've probably seen this before. Every business agreement, it comes down to this. I have money, you have stuff, and we're exchanging my money for your stuff under the terms of an agreement. So if you think about it, there's actually two kinds of privacy that you need. First of all, we want the money and the stuff to be private, and we want the movement to be private. That's one thing, right? So and by the way, money and stuff can be widgets, supply chain items, physical assets. So I would say the most common use case in that category of the world is supply chain traceability. What is it? Where did it come from? Where is it going? Believe it or not, today the way that most companies interact with each other is I, company the buyer, can see you, the supplier, and I can see one step down to the person I'm selling to, but I can't see anything other than that. And the truth is that a lot of my big supply chain problems or distribution problems happen not from my first tier supplier, but from the person who's supplying them. Right. And I can't see far enough back. So with blockchain, I can see a couple of steps back without exposing that data to my competition. So that's super helpful. And blockchain data is really cool because when you create in the traditional world, what happens is if I'm selling something to you, I'll send you an electronic message. It's called EDI, electronic data interchange. I'll send you an electronic message saying, hey, Hudson, I'm shipping you these widgets. And then you'll create a new entry in your own systems to receive those widgets. And in doing so, what's happening is I've got my tracking of the widgets and you've got yours, and we never like reconcile them. Right. And mistakes happen. And as it's like this game of telephone, as data moves through the system, it gets worse and worse and worse. Right. And so people are like, how come you can't trace it back? Isn't everything electronic? Yes, it's all electronic, but it's all moving in these little silos. And they're like, wait, that serial number here, well, we just cut off the last three digits because our system didn't have room for it. You get all kinds of crazy things that make this data very bad. The cool thing about blockchain with supply chain traceability and supply chain management is if I create a token down here two steps back, I don't just recreate the data every time I move it. And when I move the token, I move all the data and all the history. And so instead of recreating all the data, I keep the stuff that's been done, and that introduces far fewer errors. So supply chain traceability, carbon traceability, just keeping track of stuff, software licenses, physical assets that you've invested in, financial assets, all of these things, knowing where they came from is very important. And there are more and more laws, whether it's around carbon or anti-slavery and trafficking. Those are very important things. So that's one type of privacy and use case. The second time is this other part of it, money for stuff under the terms of an agreement. Now, in financial markets, right, when you go to the stock market or you buy Bitcoin or ETH through an exchange, it's just a swap. Money for stuff, no special terms. But large companies, when they transact with each other, they care about the long-term relationship, right? If you think about a car maker and they're buying brake pads, they don't just go into the market and like generic brake pads. Those brake pads that they design are with a particular supplier for a multi-year agreement, and that supplier is cutting them probably a special deal based on this long-term relationship. And so the terms of that deal, how much we buy, what the discount is, those are very important. And they're also very, very sensitive and secret. And so what goes on there is that in that second part, the people want to automate their business agreements and keep track of them and keep track of bills and payments and receipts automatically and discounts and rebates. So that's the second type of use case. And now that we can do private business agreements on public blockchains, we're starting to see those ramp up.
Awesome. Yeah, how I've always thought about it, and I worked at USAA, which is like a bank and insurance company in 2015, doing enterprise blockchain way too early. Like there was like IBM was just getting started. There was R3 back then, but one of the things I would always look at for use cases, because they would try to put everything on a blockchain at the time, was do you need to like do you have an intermediary right now that needs to be cut out? If that's the case, if there needs to be like a way for like to save money by not having an escrow, if there needs to be, the deletion of silos because you either don't trust or can't reliably get data and you want to be all on the same thing. The cutting out the intermediary is like the most core part of it, I feel like.
It that's a key part of it. I also think just even when there are two or three parties, and it's not necessarily that one is an intermediary, but people struggle keeping their data and their points straight. And so one of the things
Mhm.
that we tell clients is good use cases for blockchain have a couple of key characteristics. Number one, you've got multiple parties. It's not good just to have blockchain use
Yeah,
internal. Right. Number two, you have shared information that you need to keep exactly synchronized between all of these parties. And or number three, you have shared business logic and rules that need to stay synchronized. And the beauty of blockchain is instead of messaging back and forth and things getting out of sync, it's like a shared database with business rules in it. Everybody sees the same information at roughly the same time. And so if there is going to be an error or disagreement, you will see it very quickly.
gotcha. Okay, that is really important. Really good point. I saw, or I was told by EY, there was a news release about Fidelity Digital Assets, and I looked at it, and it said there was the EY blockchain analyzer reconciler that Fidelity Digital Assets is using now. What is that, and why is it important? And yeah, it's like, what is it?
Great. So great. So we have, earlier you mentioned that we have a SaaS application business. One of the purposes of not just doing like consulting or accounting is having a SaaS application business. One of our goals is to make it easy for other people to consume, enterprises to consume blockchain in their business and plug it in. And so we have two types of business applications. One type is for doing stuff, making tokens, smart contracts, etc. So that application suite is called OpsChain, and it's really useful for that stuff. And it hides all the ZK math, complexity, and privacy, everything. The second one, if you think about like, if you're running a business, you want to do stuff, you need to do something else, which is you need to know what happened. So blockchain analyzer is a companion tool that we built, which falls under the know what happened. And using blockchain analyzer, you can look at wallets, bank balance, account balances, token transfer history, security testing. So the analyzer suite is an analytical suite. And in the case of Fidelity, what they're doing is they're using our analytical suite to validate their own internal transaction records to make sure that as an external third party, we agree with their internal records and there's no mistakes.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. So, okay, so it's like an ether scan for business.
It's an enterprise ether scan with some very specific functionality. Now, one of the things that's kind of interesting is a lot of people say, like, well, can't you just use Etherscan for that? And the answer is absolutely you can. And by the way, I love Etherscan and all of their related products. It's fantastic. And what enterprises want though is they want like batch processing. And when they're giving, what's happening is they're giving us for validation very, very sensitive business data. And so the secret sauce in what we do isn't actually the blockchain or the analytics. The secret sauce in this particular case is kind of mundane. It's the fact that we are really, really rigorous and secure in how we handle all the information, how we interact with Fidelity's systems. You literally, and you know this because you were at USAA, you want to interact with a large company, you get like a book this thick of like rules, security policies, procedures, audits, reviews, and that is and that's where I see this as being very important. We're headed into an era, in case anybody didn't already notice, where regulatory compliance and security are going to be the two most important things that enterprises look for in this space. And this is something that we in particular are very good at.
Got it. Awesome. So actually, okay, good. This goes to the next question. You did mention regulatory things that businesses have to go through. What is the current state of kind of regulatory clarity or issues that are happening in the blockchain related to the blockchain space, but especially like if there are specific regions or places in the world that you've kind of seen as like a latest thing in this?
So I'm very very bullish and optimistic about the regulatory environment. Last week's kind of big settlement here in the U.S. was, I think, another I think good positive step. These are we're taking steps to both put good actors under a positive framework and make it clear that bad actors will be punished. There are a bunch of really good things that are going on around the world. First of all, very unappreciated but truly excellent is Japan's regulatory environment.
Mhm.
Japan did a great job. It's really worth noting every single customer of FTX Japan got their money back, all of it.
Wow. I didn't know
That
that.
should give you a sense. Like, the Japanese regulators did a terrific job of learning the lessons from Mount Gox, which
Mhm.
we've all sort of that was like the original. That was the OG scandal. We've all forgotten about it because it seems like small potatoes now, but uh, in Japan, they took that lesson seriously. They took action, and it made a really good result. And Japan has a great environment. Singapore, I was in Singapore, Hong Kong, and Australia a couple months ago. Really positive environment, especially in Singapore. Like, tons of innovation happening there. Um, just got back actually from Saudi Arabia and Dubai, which has obviously a ton of crypto that's going on there, and a lot of very progressive regulation. Those markets are a little bit smaller. Hong Kong and Singapore have access to the really, really large Asia Pacific market. The Middle East, not quite as big a market, but a very good regulatory environment, a very progressive one. The two things I'm most bullish about, they're not quite as aggressively like pro crypto and blockchain as the rest of the world, but they're the big kind of growth, the big global markets. Number one, the European Union. There's a law called the Markets and Crypto Assets Law, which starts going into effect starting next June and provides a really great regulatory framework across the EU, which is basically the world's second largest economic bloc. That is very rigorous, is thoughtful, basically structured and legalizes all kinds of digital asset tokens. And then lastly, of course, you get to the US, which is the world's biggest market. It's the world's most technologically advanced market. We haven't made as much progress here, but ETF approvals are on the horizon. We have a really, a couple of world-class firms here that have done a great job and invested serious money in regulatory compliance. So although I feel like I would love it if the U.S. would move a bit faster, that's probably unrealistic given that we have an election coming up. But I am quite positive about the overall direction, and I'm quite positive about kind of giving some legal structure, because right now the vast majority of like investors can't access this market until there's a regulatory structure. If you're a very wealthy individual, a family office or something, absolutely you can do whatever you want. But for most ordinary people, it needs to be regulatory compliant, stock exchange listed, audited. Those are the sensible things to gain access to kind of good product.
Got it. On the ETF thing, I was kind of wondering this because I'm not like deep in the trad financial stuff. Like I'll know way more about some of the DeFi and things like that, even if I don't always participate. And the ETF thing was something like everyone was excited about, and the only thing how I reasoned with it was, I guess if that happens, that's almost like a thumbs up from traditional like financial institutions and investors, and creates kind of this mode of like, oh, if this is legal, why can't this other thing be legal? Is it as simple as that, or is it something else?
Um, it's a little bit of that and more. So part of it is it's an endorsement, but the other part of it is, so most large pension retirement asset funds, they have very specific rules. You can only use high quality kind of investment grade, really rigorously produced, audited stuff for your customers, because it's it's intended as fundamentally a low risk product environment. As a result, it must be listed on kind of a recognized stock exchange, follow all the SEC rules, and ETFs are accessible to any investor and fund, which means that if you're a really big pension fund and you want to allocate even 1% of your assets to crypto or ETH, Today, you can't do that. But under an ETF model, you can buy those because they're listed and regulated. They've met rigorous review process. They have sufficient liquidity. They look quite well structured, and they're not no risk, but they're not wild and crazy risk. And I think one of the things that is going to happen is going to be very important for people to think about is in this next upcycle, in this next wave of growth, there's going to be much less risk of what I'll call outright fraud and theft, right? I think regulatory environments improving, people have access to more and more. The widespread crypto exchanges are quite high quality. The players who are left in this business are thoughtful about the regulatory environment, but people should still be aware, like you can still lose a ton of money in crypto, right? And it's still a immature, relatively less risk and relatively less liquid, much higher risk investment. And so hopefully people will be pragmatic and cautious in how much they put into this.
Got it. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So two of the things that a lot of people know about EY blockchain is Nightfall and Starlight because they are open source tools that are, in my opinion, the bread and butter of ops chain to an extent. And can you kind of just quickly explain what those two tools are? Then we'll dive a little bit deeper into where they are now, the latest, and things like that.
Absolutely. So Nightfall and Starlight are the two key products that we have built and invested in and taken to market as public domain open source solutions. And that's why, by the way, it's not called EY Nightfall, it's called Nightfall. And it's not called EY Starlight because we have made them public domain and open source. And we've made them public domain and open source because we want everybody to be able to use them. Each one of these solves a privacy problem. So Nightfall is a layer 2 privacy rollup that allows enterprises to transact with each other under privacy. And let me just take a moment to talk about that because there's a bunch of words I use very specifically and carefully, right? First of all, Nightfall is not a mixer, right? It is a proper zero knowledge privacy solution. And that's really important because mixers only work for fungible tokens. But a lot of stuff that enterprises do are non-fungible. So that's one important thing to note is it is a proper zero knowledge based, mathematically robust privacy solution. Secondly, it is for enterprises only. So if I hope that one day consumers will have access to trading based on Nightfall, but at least in the form that EY is actively contributing to, you must have an enterprise identity certificate to use the network. And that's for a couple of reasons. Number one, we're very cautious about what's happened with some of these other privacy solutions. We want to provide privacy. We don't want to taint the outcome of privacy in this environment for the users in a way that we've seen with some of the other solutions. Secondly, we there by requiring an identity certificate, in some ways, it's more accurate to say what we're offering is confidentiality rather than privacy. One of the things that frustrates me like crazy is I think people and businesses have a right to privacy. A right to privacy is not the same as a right to anonymous transactions, right? That is really important. And so regulators will be able to see who is using the system. Most importantly, your competition will not be able to see what you are doing. And if a regulator comes to you and says, hey, we see you're using Nightfall, can you tell us how these transactions are operating or what you're doing? You can not only show the regulators, but you can prove that your statements are truthful, and you will do so without disclosing everybody else's transactional data. In terms of where Nightfall is, it's a zero knowledge layer 2 rollup. It's running live on the Polygon proof of stake network now. We haven't deployed it yet on Ethereum, mostly just because the gas cost is high. And I think we're getting fairly close to the point where we're on Nightfall 3 today, which is a ZK optimistic rollup. I think sometime in 2024, early middle of the year, I hope we will deploy Nightfall 4, which will be a ZK rollup with instant finality. So I'm excited about Nightfall. It's not just EY. I would say we're definitely the major contributor. It's not just EY. let me turn to Starlight. So Nightfall is about moving the tokens under privacy, and we can do like ERC 20, 721s, 1155s. I think we're trying to add 3525s, which are like semi fungible, which will be useful. And then there's Starlight. So Nightfall is about moving stuff around. Starlight is about executing business logic. And Starlight isn't a layer two. It's what technically I think is called a transpiler.
Hmm.
And Starlight came out of a really tough lesson that we learned a few years ago. So as we got better and better, and we built the first iteration of Nightfall, because we've been working on Nightfall like 7 years, right? And we knew very quickly, okay, moving stuff is great. I also need business rules. And our first thought was like, okay, we'll just teach our developers to use something called Socrates, which is basically a zero knowledge circuit kind of builder. Turns out that did not fly well. Like the math knowledge required for that was too much. And, we think engineers, like they all love math. They don't. Like engineering and math aren't always exactly aligned. And it flopped. We tried, we flopped, we failed at that. And so we sort of went back to the drawing board, and one of our teams said, we should just build a compiler, right? We should just make it easy, right? Our developers know how to write Solidity. We should make it that easy. And so what Starlight does is it allows you to take a Solidity smart contract, add a few special markers to the places in the logic that you want private, and then it recompiles it or transpiles the output into a zero knowledge circuit. And this way, you don't have to be a mathematical expert in order to create privacy enabled applications that run on top of Ethereum.
Awesome. Yeah, I looked at some of the screenshots and the explainers in the Starlight repo, and I just had no idea someone had built something that can change Solidity and to kind of a private Solidity thing. And when you say it's open source and people can contribute, so I guess people probably would see the EY on the repo and be like, "Oh, I either can't contribute or oh, it's an enterprise thing." But what is the draw in contributing to this, and like what has been done to make it easier for contributions in these places to happen?
So it is like any other open source project. It's up on GitHub. We have a CC0 license. There's no surprises. There's no gotchas in there. And anyone who tries to contribute, like I think you'll find our team is super welcoming and enthusiastic. We also try to answer questions that show up in the GitHub repos for both Nightfall and Starlight, because I made Starlight sound easy. It's not an absolute slam dunk. Like if you're not careful, you can end up with problems. Like the Brazilian central bank is testing out Starlight for some of their privacy enabled central bank digital currency prototyping work. By the way, I didn't just disclose something secret that's publicly known, although maybe only in Portuguese. But we're talking to them. We'll help anybody who wants to build privacy stuff. As I mentioned to you before, like I would love to see privacy more widely used. Starlight is actually accessible for anybody, even if it's as an individual user. There's no kind of entry control on the layer 2 access. Starlight is just an application. You can play with it, you can download it, you can use it, you can contribute to it, ask questions, get help. We want people to use this and be successful, and we want to make privacy easy for anybody to set up and use as easy as we can.
Got it. Okay. So when it comes to, I guess, the future of both of those tools, you said that there's going to be version 4 of Nightfall, and then Starlight will continue to be improved. So is there an end game, or is it kind of a completely like just a continuous iteration on improving and finding the cheaper, easiest way to do these kind of things?
There's no end game per se. Like I'm always interested. So if you think about, we sat down at one point a few years ago, and we said, kind of transaction volume do we really need? Like if you imagine, we have a client, for example, they for one of their product lines, they make 500,000 packages of medicine a day. And each package of medicine has an individual serial number that kind of makes it an NFT, right? And it moves on average 3 times from them through various distributors before it gets to the patient. So you do the math, that's 2 million NFT transfers a day for one product line. So we started doing a little bit of crazy back of the envelope math. Like, if we brought all the world's major industries online, what kind of capacity would we need? And the answer came down to about 40 billion transactions would have to be processed every day. And by the way, each of those have to be well below a penny, like probably a tenth of a penny or less to get done at such volume without sort of breaking the bank. So that's kind of like from a volume and cost standpoint, that's my end goal. At the end of the day, right, as I said, every business agreement comes down to money for stuff under an agreement. So from my standpoint of view, there's no limit to the number of business to business agreements that can be moved onto a blockchain. We have incredible ROI data from Microsoft where we built a non-privacy enabled smart contract system a few years ago before we could really do this at scale. But what it did was it proved to us, this was for smart Xbox video game smart licenses. We cut cycle time from 45 days to 2 minutes for basically approving and completing transactions and account statements. And we cut the cost of managing the whole system in half. So ROI is amazing for doing this. We think once it's accessible, everybody will do it. There's one last major thing that we do want to get thrown in. So we have Nightfall and Starlight. We have one more thing that we're working on, which is probably going to be a late 2024, maybe early 2025 thing, which is something called Starfall. And the issue is this. Nightfall allows you to move stuff, and Starlight allows you to set up business logic. We need those two to be able to work together so that you can use the very large privacy data pool of Nightfall to execute business rules that are specific to a Starlight contract. That's the maximum level of privacy you can achieve, that we can think about how to achieve. And we need the connections to work. We know how to do it. We built a prototype. We haven't industrialized it yet. We're waiting for the version 4 of Nightfall before we industrialize the link between the two.
That's really cool. Okay, Starfall. Nightfall, Starlight. I like that actually. I wonder how long it'll take. So, like, there's gonna be like a person who uses it, and it's like 3 months later they're like, "Oh, this is why it's called that." So yeah, no. So I will wrap it up here. I would say, what are your final thoughts? Anything that you want to say, or thoughts about the industry? Literally anything. It doesn't even have to be about blockchain. What's your favorite TV show? Could be blockchain, whichever one.
So maybe two small final thoughts. Like, first of all, so I've been in this business. This is my 10th year kind of in the blockchain business. This is my 8th year kind of running the business at EY. We are here to make sure that blockchain is so much more than like finance and grift and stuff like that. Like, I think a lot of people forget, like, the purpose of capital markets and financial services is to channel capital into productive uses, like to make stuff and deal with scarcity and handle our resources well. So I really believe enormously in the positive social value of doing a better job, a more efficient job of managing our scarce resources. So that's maybe first point. Like, I'm committed, and we're all of us at EY, we're super committed to, like, yes, we want to make a business. I really want to make a business, but I want to make a business with blockchain. I want to make a business that is more efficient and it's fairer for all the participants. And there's no one big intermediary kind of vacuuming up all the value. Second closing thought is I wrote a book about all of this because I love talking about this, as you know I do. It's called Ethereum for Business. It's published by the University of Arkansas. It's available everywhere you buy books, which means Walmart, Apple, Amazon. And it's kind of I call it a love story. It's a romance novel about like all the business use cases for Ethereum. And if you like this discussion and you want to learn about the business side, it's very plain English. It's not deeply technical. And if you buy a copy of the book and you take a selfie of yourself with it and you send it to Ethereum for Business at ey.com, I will send you back an NFT. I need your Polygon proof of stake wallet address. I will send you a first edition NFT.
That's awesome. I've never, ever heard a business book be called a romance novel, but there's a first for everything, and you might have just cracked it. So that makes sense. Thank you so much, Paul, for taking the time for this, and yeah, have a great rest of your day.
You too, Hudson. It is always a delight to see you.